Well, hey, Dawn. Thanks so much for coming to the podcast. We appreciate you coming and finally being able to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So we have talked prior to the podcast, Dawn, about the wackiness of Muncie, the wackiness of the jar, and of the last couple of years. So we have to, before we go any further, we have to hear what is your wacky or multiple wacky Muncie stories. What does Muncie mean to you, Dawn?
Well, me and Muncie go way back. So I grew up in Selma, which is just a little town east of Muncie, and there was nothing there but a Pizza King. So like Muncie was the town. Also, my grandparents lived on the south side of Muncie, so I was over there a lot, like running the streets and alleys of Muncie, buying like 69-cent tacos from Taco Bell back in the day. We would like scrounge up change and go to the Taco Bell to get soft tacos. So like I pretty much grew up in Muncie, and then I went to college at Ball State, so stayed in Muncie. And that was a fun experience, very diverse experience, being around a lot of different types of people. And then I moved away for a little bit. I moved to West Lafayette for a job. So I graduated with a teaching degree, but then could not get a teaching job for like, I think it was 3 years after I graduated.
So is that what you went to Ball State for? You actually originally went for teaching? Or not?
Yeah, I went for secondary education with the English major. So my plan was to go teach middle or high school English language arts, which you know about.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
So then it took me, just at that time there weren't a lot of jobs. You kind of had to have like an in, know someone at a school. So I had worked in property management during college, which was hilarious and had a ton of great stories with college students and how they live and different funny things that they do. So I got promoted within that company to run a property in West Lafayette. So then I went from Ball State's campus to Purdue's campus and ran a complex, which was even more diverse because there's a ton of international students. So I enjoyed that, and then I actually moved to Florida for a little bit, and then I came back to Muncie because I'm a family girl and I miss my family a lot. So I moved back to Muncie, and then I got a teaching job finally at Daleville.
Right. So that was a lot there, and I'm sure several years went throughout all of that. So you were at Ball State, 3-4 years for your bachelor?
4.5, actually, yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So out of Ball State, how did you fall into property management? Because those are a little bit of a different.
Yeah. So
career.
I worked 2 jobs and was a full-time student. So I was blessed to have some grants and scholarships from having a single parent, but I still had to pay my way through college, some of that. So I worked 2 jobs, and mainly in restaurants. There was a restaurant called Oscar Ray's back in the day that was open. It was a ma and pa restaurant, and I was just kind of tired of working in food. So I had just a random friend that worked in leasing, and she told me about a part-time job. So I applied for that, and then it went from just a leasing agent to working full-time to working getting promoted.
Right. That's awesome. No, that's really cool. And so from Ball State, oh man, I have so many questions about that because I'm sure you have a lot of stories. But yeah, so what? Well, so you were fresh out of Ball State, being a Ball State student, into the property management of Ball State. What was that transition like?
So
without getting into too much detail, I guess, because I'm sure that was crazy.
I would say, so the good thing is when I was just working and leasing here in Muncie, I helped out a lot of residents who lived around the area, be it we would meet for Starbucks. I actually developed friends that were residents that would come into the office. And then when I got promoted, it was actually at a different property. So then I was a boss of people, which I did not feel equipped to be a boss. I was, 23 and no management experience really.
Were you over people that were older than you?
Yes, some of which was interesting. But I've always had the philosophy of you can learn so much from people. Don't try to go in and just take charge and overrun everybody. They have been running this property long before I ever came there. Our maintenance guys or some of the leasing agents, learn from them, and then you can learn how to run the property. So I'm always about learning from other people, and kind of the way I was raised is you treat, the custodian the same as the CEO. Everyone has value. And so that was a good way to just like develop a really good team in West Lafayette. And then in Muncie, it was just amazing, like some of the stories. For example, like we would have someone call and say like, hey, my toilet's clogged. And then we would, send the maintenance guys over to look at it, and someone had broken a wooden spoon off in the toilet. So then
like
you begin...
Like a ladle or something?
Yeah, like a cooking spoon. Okay. They broke that off in the toilet, and we're like, okay, so we had to replace the whole toilet. But like, so of course I asked the question, like, why did that happen?
Right.
And the girl's like, I dropped my makeup compact down there and I was trying to get it out.
Okay.
So like, one, I wouldn't use makeup from the toilet again.
Right.
Two, what crosses your mind that like a wooden spoon's going to get that out?
Yeah.
Not to mention, I mean, there were just hilarious stories of, college kids, like some obviously, living the college life, partying and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure on the spectrum of things to share, I'm sure the wooden ladle inside of the toilet's probably low on the spectrum.
Yes, that's a very modest story of things I experienced.
Gotcha. I'm sure.
So yeah, it was. I would recommend people working in that industry if you have a sense of humor, because it gave me a lot of fun stories and experiences.
Did you have more at Purdue? Do you feel like you had more crazy experiences at Purdue rather than Ball State, or vice versa?
They were both crazy, but just in a different way. Like, I feel like Muncie was more like the party scene stories of things you might find someone passed out on a sidewalk somewhere, versus Purdue was like a culture shock, because there were a lot of international students. Like, students would literally come in with a suitcase with a passport from the Republic of China and a check to pay their rent for the whole year, and not have anything, like no furniture, no vehicle, and could speak the language but not understand, obviously, cultural context. So there were a lot of funny stories with like the culture adjustment, and so that was definitely unique. Like one time in West Lafayette, we went to look at a girl's sink. Well, she had like, I don't know what she put down the garbage disposal, but there was a full plant growing out of it. Like, I don't know if it was some sort of vegetable or like house plant, but there was a whole thing of like greenery growing out.
Like, were you able to ask if that was on purpose? Or?
No, we just kind of let it go. Because I was conscious about like, I don't want to offend people, and how they live. This is their home. But yeah, I don't know what that was all about, if that was like on purpose or an accident.
So before the endeavor with project management, which, by the way, with that, something I was wanting to ask, like, did that help in being able, like, because you were saying you were over people, and that was like you were thrown into that in kind of your early 20s. So like, did that help at all as far as like being assertive or having to give direction? Was it scary, or were you kind of being put into that position, or did you feel like you were able to kind of like lean into that? Because I know for me, that would be really horrifying, especially if there was a situation where you're giving, not orders or anything like that, but you're giving advice or opinions to people that are older than you. So did that help with assertiveness or being...
I definitely had to learn that. It was not something, I mean, I would consider myself to be an assertive person now, but maybe then I definitely had to learn that. And especially with people who were older than me plus more experienced than me. Right. I tried not to let them know how much I didn't know, I guess, at times. Yeah. Fake it till you make it, I guess. But
fake it till you make it.
There were uncomfortable moments for sure. And I luckily had like a boss over me that was really supportive and helped walk me through that. But there was an example that I actually had to fire someone, and it was not pretty. Like, they may or may not have chucked something across the desk at me. So I was like, oh, this is fun, right? That's like not something you want to do anyways, is fire someone. So it definitely taught me a lot about people, even like psychology, like how people tick, what makes them tick, how they adjust to stress, or just getting outside of your comfort zone and having to, do the job, even if it's not necessarily what you agree with. Yeah. I had to fire 2 people. That one person was very negative, obviously. Like, they chucked keys across the desk at me. Jeez. But it was okay. It was the right choice. And then another person I actually had to fire was I considered like a friend, which was really hard. I think because a lot of us moved there to Lafayette, we all became pretty close because we just kind of became a family, I guess. But I had to do kind of a tough love thing, which really bothered me. But I did it, and then I honestly felt bad about it for quite some time. And then a couple years later, that person came back to me and said, hey, thank you for doing that, because you showed me, like, it's important to, like, be on time and to show up and stuff like that. So that helped. Like, it was I was full of anxiety, I guess, at that time, trying to navigate how you do that. But in the end, I felt like it worked out. So.
Yeah, that had to be like a stair step. It's like you already have stressors, anxieties, worries, being in that position, and then now we have to enter into the realm of firing your friends. Yeah, that's always a nice added stressor, added bonus.
For sure.
But yeah, so I did want to ask when you're talking about like your student life at Ball State and like going to Ball State for education, secondary education with English as an English major. What was that like, and what was kind of the push to make you want to pursue that? Like what made you kind of decide like this is the route that I want to pursue?
Well, I've always liked reading and literature, so I knew I wanted to do something in that area. Probably like every other college student, I changed my major at least once. Nice. I started pre-pharmacy, actually. Oh, wow. And then I took like a chemistry class, and I was like, yeah, that's a lot of math and science no. So, and I was honestly like, that was more money motivated than like passion motivated. So I switched my major and decided to do English, language arts, and then I'm like, okay, so what can you do with that major besides like be a writer, which, yeah, that's not guaranteed like a paycheck, right? Or become a teacher, which I had always, actually as a kid, I wanted to be a teacher, and then kind of just like, not lost that, but just let it go over the years because I knew that like they didn't make much money. Not that I'm money driven, but you got to survive. Yeah. So when I was younger in school, I had a pretty troubled experience. Like I just went through a lot as a kid growing up in the household that I did. My dad was an alcoholic. There was just a lot of fighting with my parents. And so I had a hard time. Like I made great grades in school and did a lot, but I was just like kind of that kid who liked to get in trouble. Like I would purposefully like push the boundaries, like, because it was fun. And so now I'm like,
is that more of like a psychopath route, or is that
not quite
sociopath?
Not quite sociopath. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. It was more, I don't know why. I think I like to make people laugh. So it was like, hey, I can, prank this teacher, and I don't care if I get in trouble, because I just didn't, because I still made good grades. So I was like, my parents, what are they going to say? Like, you still have A's, but you're a jerk in class.
So you're like the person that would like just be the patsy, like I'll go down for it, but it's worth it because I get to make everyone laugh.
I got to tell you this story. It's hilarious.
Do it.
My mom was like, why do you have a D in choir? Okay. How do you get a D in choir? Like, I'm not that bad of a singer.
That's a great question. How do you get
Well, it was because of behavior. So Mr. Morris, if you're out there and listening, I just want to apologize for my behavior. Mr. Morris would be chain smoking outside the school. I know why now, because of students like me. But in choir, we had this thing that he was recording us so we could listen to how we sounded. Well, he's like, there was a huge sound system back then. I mean, this was like, 95 or something when I was in middle school. And he's like trying to get it going. Well, I would act like I would get a Kleenex and I would go behind the system and pull a bunch of cords out. So then when he went to like do the buttons, he couldn't figure it out. So just like stuff like that. And then one time my friend I had already been kicked out of the class for that day. So I was just hanging out in the hallway, go out to the hall. And he busts out of the classroom with one of my best friends who had stuffed a whole roll of toilet paper down her shirt. Okay. I don't know why, because you're weird.
For later.
Yeah, you're weird in middle school.
Right.
So she just stuffed the whole thing down there, and he was like taking her to the office. But I sprinted and dove and grabbed a hold of his leg and said, "Take me instead." And like, I don't know why. I was just really like a goofy kid that liked to push the limits, I guess. I was obviously, I mean, looking back, that's like a kid seeking attention, really, like to be noticed.
Right.
And then as I got into high school, it was less like me acting out, rebelling, like I just did my work, but I kind of got like, I started doing stuff that my parents did. Like I started drinking and like doing stuff at a young age that was rebellious in that way. Again, luckily, it never affected my grades. Like, I still made really good grades, but instead, I just went through a lot of, like, anxiety and depression when my parents got a divorce when I was 15, so it was my freshman year of high school, and not really knowing or understanding what that was, like anxiety at that time. I was put on antidepressants when I was 14. And so, journeying through that with a family that didn't process emotions, I guess, in a healthy way. I started doing things that they did, like drink or, I would, do drugs or something like that just to escape pain. So when I was in school, I would do those things, but I was still an athlete. I played volleyball and I was also a cheerleader. And then I made like straight A's. And then teachers were like, I don't know if they were like mad or just didn't like me or what. So they would try to get me in trouble a lot, like get me kicked out of school.
The teachers would?
Yeah. I had 2 teachers that I really loved that I confided in, and they were like for me. But like I had anonymous letters written to the school about me living out of district, which was true because my parents divorced, but my dad lived in
but like who's going to be sending anonymous letters?
Right. And like instead of reaching out and trying to help and like, hey, what's going on? Like, you want to talk? Like, do you need something? Like they would just gossip or like try to get me kicked out of school. So I really took that with me and decided as a teacher, like I want to be a teacher who is that person who can help students, who can find the kids in the margins, who can like spot, okay, they're going through a lot and I can tell. So I want to like pour into those kids. So that's why I became a teacher. I mean, and then I was also like, y'all can't pull anything on me because I've done it all.
If Mr. Morris is still alive, he knows I've done it all.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Morris.
He's probably the one that was like writing in the anonymous letters. He's
Perhaps.
like, get this girl out of here.
Perhaps.
No, that's awesome.
So yeah.
No. So with that, going through Ball State, through the property management. So I've known you for a long time. I had no idea that you were a Floridian. Is that what they call them in Florida?
Yeah, a Floridian.
Floridian. Are you serious? Is it?
I don't
Floridian?
know.
Okay, so
that's
you
what
are
I call them.
Yeah, so it's a known fact that people that live in Florida are called Floridians. So how long were you a Floridian?
Not long.
Okay.
So I moved there. One of my best friends since kindergarten moved there after college, and she started teaching. She's a kindergarten teacher. God bless her. And she was looking for a roommate at the time, and I was looking for a job, and they actually had a lot of teaching jobs down there at the time, and so I moved down there seeking a teaching job, and we were roommates. And then literally, of course, as soon as I moved down there, they did about like a couple $1 million worth of budget cuts in that county for schools. So then it declined with the hiring process, and now I know like that was all part of God's plan, because if I had gotten a job down there, I may never have been back to Muncie, at least to live. And then I also would have never met like my husband or been working here and all that good stuff. So I lived in Florida for just maybe like 4 months. And it was beautiful. I love the beach, but
Which side were you on? The Gulf side or the Atlantic?
The Atlantic side, Jacksonville.
Oh, Jacksonville.
Yeah. So
right, cool.
My favorite part about living there was waking up and watching the sunrise. Like I would go out to the beach when it was still like the sun was rising, and it was never busy out there, and I'd get my Dunkin' Donuts coffee and sit out there, and sometimes people would be surfing and like just watching the sunrise, and
awesome.
Just felt like that was a great time to talk to God.
Absolutely. There's like moments on the beach early in the morning or at night, similar for me, like being somewhere like in the forest, it's like this is what peace feels like.
Yeah,
This
for
is
sure.
like what solitude is like. When people talk about it in poems, this is what Robert Frost is talking about.
Exactly.
This is beautiful. Absolutely. So from being a Floridian, if that's what we've decided that they're called, so you came back to Muncie. The Muncie bug was already in you. You're like, I got to go back home, go back to Party Central. Once you got back, where was like your? I knew you were a teacher, but where was your first job at Daleville?
First teaching job, yes. So
Really?
yeah.
I didn't know that. So like not every now we're getting to it because I didn't know how we were gonna bring it up or we were gonna bring it up at the beginning. So not everybody knows this. Some people in the jar I've told this and they're like it's like a double check. Like I just told them like I have like 3 thumbs or something. So you were my teacher. You were my English teacher. You were my film lit teacher, my creative writings teacher. What else? You taught more than that, I think.
10th grade. So, yeah, 9th
grade.
and 10th grade English.
9th and 10th grade English. Yeah, you taught a couple classes and that I had like 3 or 4. And I've told that to multiple people and they're like, "No, you're lying." You're like that like I've just told them that like the sky is falling or something. They're like, "No, it's not real. No." But not only were you my teacher, your husband Justin was also my science teacher as well. He taught me biology. And I had him like through middle school into high school as well. So
I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding.
no, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, like most people don't believe that. But another crazy thing with that as well is that like that's kind of like where like I first met you. But then like there have been like other circumstances that like through CR that I also have like been able to just like through different CR circles that I've been able to like in music been able to like reconnect and that's really the reason I'm at the jar is because of you. I mean honestly, and because of God orchestrated that, but talking about how he kind of orchestrated you out of Florida, I mean he really does have that spiritual orchestration, which I know is kind of a weird thing phraseology, but it is so true because it's just I reflect on that as well, like you being my teacher, and then also most people probably don't know that it is through you being here in Muncie and at the jar is why I am now in Muncie. So we'll get to that in a minute. But yes, so you worked at Daleville, and where else outside of Daleville?
So when I came back to Muncie, I actually worked at the YOC, the Youth Opportunity Center, which those of you that don't know is just kind of like the juvenile center for Muncie. They have both like a rehabilitation emotionally for mental health, but then they also have like a jail for teens or whatever. So I started working there, and I actually was working there when I got the Daleville job because it was only like a part-time teaching gig. Oh, okay. So when Anderson consolidated, a lot of kids came to Daleville and the school grew, so the class sizes were too big. So they were like, hey, we need to hire somebody, and it was your class.
Awesome.
So it was big, so they like split you guys up, and the lucky ones got me. No, I'm kidding.
No, for real.
So yeah, that was my first year ever teaching. So I did stay working at YOC a little bit while I was working at Daleville, but it became a lot because of teaching, and then I would go work from like 3 to 11 at YOC. So that was a lot. Wow. So I eventually stepped back from YOC and then worked in the Play-Doh lab too.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't think I've ever even thought twice about that until you just brought that up. Outside of high school, would you explain for the people that think that we're talking about Play-Doh right now what the Play-Doh lab was?
So Play-Doh lab was like credit recovery, basically. Yeah. So it was like a computer lab that kids who were maybe behind or needed a little extra help would do, like language arts, math, science, kind of your core subjects.
So when I was in middle school, I think it was it might have been like 7th grade or something. So one of the they would filter through that classroom, like they would do like success periods and stuff, like just transition periods. Basically, we'll put you in there just to like kill time or something. So I was in there for something like that, and one of the older classmen was in there for whatever reason as well. And this is I'm new to like the high school atmosphere because at Daleville it's like middle school and high school's in the same building, right? And so I was like new to like being around like a lot of older kids, and I was like, this is weird. And like this was like probably just a couple weeks into the school year, and like one of the older classmen were sitting near each other. He looks over at me. He's like, "Hey, check this out." And he had, I didn't know this, but he had like tobacco in his mouth, and he just spit like 3 shots right into the carpet, and he just rubbed it in with his boot. yeah. And I remember watching that in awe, because I have never seen like just. I think first off, the confidence. I've never seen that amount of confidence. Being able to just like, I mean, it's like he never broke eye contact either. He looked at me and just spit that sucker right into the carpet 3 different times, and it vanished. It was.
You never had really seen that sort of barbaric action in school.
Yeah, no, I was blown away, and that is what began my journey into being a worship pastor. So that's my origin story is, exactly. But
yeah, so at Daleville, I, taught part-time, and then they decided to keep me and hire me full-time that next year as an educator. So I actually moved up with your grade to 10th grade, because that's where they needed me. And then they allowed me to start teaching electives as the years went on, maybe like your junior year or something like that.
So another funny story with that, because there's like very few times of where this story would have any relevance at all. But like going into my junior year, there were 2 ways, at least at that time, there were 2 ways to get into, what was it, like English honors? That was like the advanced English, which I had no business in being in English honors, okay? I was doing just fine, and you're like, in just normal English. We had a good thing going, Don, but I was wanting to swing for the fences, and I was like, I'm gonna find a way to get into English honors for whatever reason, just because I wanted to. And there were 2 ways at the time to get into English honors. One of them, you had to make good grades, and then the second way is that you had to have like a write-off from your English teacher, like your 10th grade English teacher, like this individual showed academic prowess or some lie like that, and then you would get accepted in, right? So I don't know if you know this, but you actually signed one of those letters for me going into my 11th grade. So the end of 10th grade, you signed that for me going into 11th grade. I don't even know how I got my hand on one of those slips, but you were able to do it. You were like, I was like, hey, would you sign this for me to get into like English honors? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. And so the next year, like the first day, this is no joke. Like I'm in Bookouts class, right? I book out again, like Mr. Morris, if you're listening to this, whatever. So anyway, she sees me in the classroom, and it's like, you can tell like that person, I think in her mind, she was like, he just doesn't belong because he's an idiot. And so she came to me very like just one-on-one. I was sitting in the desk, and she's like, I don't know if you belong here. Are you in the right room? And I'm like, yeah, Dan, this is English honors. And like it was like a big deal. She like made a big deal on the whole class. Come to find out, I was in the class and I failed out. So it was. So I ended up.
In my defense, I thought that was a permission slip. No, I'm kidding.
No. So I ended up finishing 11th grade, my junior year English class, with like in normal English. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't remember signing that, but
yes.
I will tell you, I do remember. I was recalling you as a student earlier today at lunch.
Awesome. Great.
And you always were a hard worker. So you may have been turning things in like a minute before they were due, but at least you turned them in.
Yeah,
so, and I
good.
feel like I actually was telling Josie, because we had lunch today, that you and I think it was 3 other kids who are your friends still,
right.
Did my favorite project in English 10, because we were doing Julius Caesar.
Oh my gosh.
And I gave options of like you could write a paper, you could do like some art thing, or you could do like drama. And you guys were literally the only ones who did anything with the drama video element. And you reenacted modern day Julius Caesar in Daleville Park.
Yeah, I was there.
And you had long hair then, and it was seriously like one of the most hilarious videos I have ever seen.
We put so much time into that, like it was like, and we had to break it up into sections because we don't know what we're doing with video editing. So it was like I think more like a 30-40 minute video, right? It was like seriously long. Yeah, I remember that. I think the idea behind why we did that is like, oh, we don't have to write a paper this way. We don't have to like.
It's less work.
It's less work, and we made a movie. we didn't make a video clip. We made a movie about Julius Caesar.
You
so.
did the fight scene with like twigs
Yes.
from a tree.
They were swords, Don. They were
hilarious.
Swords. Yeah, I think. We added a few other fight moves like pocket sand was in it. I remember that was one. Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about that. I knew that used to be like a running joke we had, but I completely forgot about the Julius Caesar tapes. The lost Julius Caesar tapes, that's what we'll call them.
I need to find them. I think I have them on an old laptop.
You should burn that old laptop. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. You know, the first time I saw Silence of the Lambs, it's a nice transition, right? The first time I saw Silence of the Lambs was in Film Lit. So, you know, I just want you to know that the impact that you've had on my life, it really has benefited me more than you know. I had no idea what that movie was even about until film Lit. And it was great.
So I secretly used to be rather obsessed with serial killers. I read several different books and documentaries about like Ted Bundy, Ed Gein, John Wayne Gacy, stuff like that. Yeah. So anyways, that movie was, I forget what film lit terms we were teaching. I don't really know how I ever got parents to give me permission to show that, but
don't know.
I mean, we definitely skipped out like the nudity parts, but there was definitely graphic language and
great movie.
Violence. Yeah. But yeah, I loved film lit because I would take all the different concepts and basically choose a movie that I liked or that I thought kids would like and show it and teach the concepts through those movies.
I realize that now. It's like probably, I mean, probably really easy for you. It's like, oh, these are just videos that I would watch. Yeah. No, it's great. But yeah, I think that kind of sparked, because like outside of, I never really was that crazy about like serial killer or crime things, but that's like, I love that now. And so that was probably one of those like pivotal moments in my life. So thanks, Dawn. Appreciate that.
As the frontal lobe is developing, if we are exposed to those things, great.
So thanks for that. You get outside of teaching, and then you're kind of on this different path. I think you were in Anderson, right? APA? Yeah,
so I taught at Daleville for 4 years, I think it was. Okay. And then I went to Anderson at APA, Anderson Preparatory Academy, is a charter school. And I started there, and I also taught English 10, and I had some like remedial classes for kids who were struggling, which I loved. Gotcha. So I taught there, and then, so going back, I met Justin, my husband, at Daleville. So he ran the volleyball program there at Daleville, and then I just coached junior high. So we met through that and became friends. And what was funny is all the kids, I don't know if you were in on this, but all the kids had stories about how we were dating and together.
It was a small school.
Yeah, before we ever really were. I mean, we were friends and would hang out, but, you know, it was progressing, but we were not, like, official.
Yeah. My graduating class was, like, 70 kids, so we needed things to entertain ourselves.
Yes.
That was one of them. Yes.
And we would never really confirm or deny that, so that was funny, you know.
Perfect.
Justin would mainly change the subject, and I would just be like, I don't know, guys, and then walk on. So, anyways, we started dating and then got engaged that next year, and then we started the school year like, hey, we're engaged, and they were like, I knew it. I knew the rumors were true. Anyways, so after we got married, then we had our daughter. Well, I was at Anderson. After we got married, I went to Anderson, and I taught there for a year, and then we were having our daughter. So during that time, I decided to stay home. And so with my experience at Daleville, as well as with Anderson, I had a lot of kids come to me with problems, like personal problems, and talk to me about things, and I wanted to help them, but I didn't like have the language or the resources to help them. So as, you know, with time and consideration and prayer, I decided to go back to school when I had my daughter, so I could stay home with her as well as go to grad school to become a counselor. So teaching kind of helped me move in that direction with, like, I always loved teaching and I've always loved the kids. I didn't necessarily love politics and, you know, how teachers are kind of like thought of as the last person, you know. But I always loved working with the kids and helping them with things. So with that, I decided to go to school to become a counselor so I could actually have the tools and the means to help kids with problems.
That's awesome. So, I mean, it's crazy too because there's even more of your story, but like hearing what you're talking about from like childhood to college to even then, it's like that. I mean, that probably had to feel like a 180 as you were going to, or 180, 360. I don't know angles either. So geometry. Sorry, Curtis Clay, Mr. Curtis. Sorry, geometry didn't work either. But 360, that had to feel like a 360. Going from like starting from what, like, you know, you said you were 15, kind of when all that happened, like with your parents, and then going from that to no, I'm going to help the kids that were like me.
Sure.
The sociopaths like me. So
yes, and teach them about Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it definitely was a motivating factor, and I always remembered those couple teachers that stood out to me who not only helped me with school, but also like life issues.
Right.
And then I wanted to help kids further than just in the classroom. So that's why I decided to go back to school for that.
That's awesome. So from there to the jar, how did you come to the jar? Because you were here before me. So what was that story like?
So attending the jar, when I moved back from Florida, I had maybe been to the jar once, like throughout my time at Ball State. A friend invited me and I went, but I wasn't really interested in a relationship with God at that point. I didn't grow up in church. We were taught like there's a God, but like we didn't really do anything with that. It's just like, okay, there's a God, but
So a little more like agnostic, kind of
possibly,
like
yeah. My mom grew up pretty strict Pentecostal.
Okay.
So she was like turned away from the church. Like she always believed in God too, but it was just different. And so we were never forced to do anything with God or religious wise. And I went with my mama and papa a couple times to a church, but they even weren't regular in church, but they definitely were strong believers. So I actually learned most of what I did from being a kid, like at their house, them reading me like Bible stories and having like little animated things of like Noah's Ark and stuff like that. Gotcha. So that seed was planted long ago, but I never really knew God at all. So when I came back from Florida, let me go back for a second. So in Lafayette, I pretty much accepted Christ. I was at a point where I was pretty much drinking every day and didn't like who I was, but also knew that I was struggling with an addiction. I mean, I had a family history of it, plus I'd been doing it since I was, 15 or so. And that was just a way to mask pain for a long time for me. And looking back, I know I had tremendous anxiety as well, because that's something I've dealt with being sober. So I finally got to a point where I was like, I'm done. I don't want to drink anymore. Like I got really sick. I have lupus, and then, which is an autoimmune disorder. And then I got mono on top of that. So I was like bedridden for a couple months. And I spent a lot of time just laying in bed, and you can only watch so much daytime TV. This is before Netflix. So I just started talking to God like, God, I remember you from what my grandparents said, but I don't know who you are or whatever. And I actually had a Joyce Meyer's devotional somehow, and I started reading through that. And so then I just accepted Christ. And I love that story because people were like, oh, so you just stopped drinking? And I'm like, no. Like I continued to drink, but as time went, God decreased that desire in me. And I realized like I wanted to do things his way and not my way. Yeah. And so giving up what I know is a lifelong struggle for people with addiction, he was able to sort of like take me out of that, which I'm so grateful for. And so whenever I kind of church shopped a little in Lafayette, but wasn't like committed anywhere. And then when I came back to Muncie, I was like the jar, that one place. And the first time I walked in, we were at the Y meeting and someone was in their pajamas. And I was like, this is my kind of place. Because I just was like, they don't care. Like, they don't care what you look like. They don't care where you're from, what you've done. Like, they love how I think God loves. So I started attending. And then after I graduated from grad school, I went into community mental health, which I really enjoyed, but was very high stress. So glad I did it because I learned so much about all kinds of spectrums of mental health, but it's very emotionally exhausting.
Yeah.
So I did that and worked there for about a year, and then a youth ministry position came open here, which I was like, I never really thought of that, God. Like, I know that you called me to teach, but I never thought about teaching like in a church, basically, like to kids. I've always loved working with adolescents and teaching things. So, hey, let's try it, and maybe I can do some counseling too with that. So that was 2017 so I had attended since probably 2010 at the JAR.
Gotcha.
And then, just grew, became a partner, got baptized, all those things, and just continued to let God lead me. And
so how many years after attending did that position kind of open up?
7.
7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
gotcha. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really amazing. So, did you? I assume like you applied or whatnot, and then that's how you. Did you have like a relationship with Chris, the pastor, beforehand, or?
Yes. So Chris actually married Justin and I. We had a destination wedding, and we flew him to that, and he was on a scooter.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So he had actually,
Yeah.
I think he ran in some marathon, triathlon, something that I don't know, because I would definitely never do because I'm too lazy. He ran in something and broke his foot, and so he was on one of those little scooters, and so he scooted out the pier because we had a beach wedding. And so he, flew there and married us, and then, I had done like partner stuff and volunteered and been part of some of like vision casting for the JAR. So yeah, we definitely had a relationship, as well as I had a relationship with some of the staff too. Yeah. So I was like, well, God, if this is where you want me, then that's where you want me. And that's where he wanted me. So
no, that's awesome. I mean, that concept too about like the will of God, I feel like a lot of people interpret that like 5,000 different ways, but I think you can look at it very simply, right? You can look at it like, what is my will? What is God's will? Because I think a lot of us live our own lives. We live for ourselves. We live for our own lives, right?
Sure.
We're not focused around living our lives intended for what God is wanting out of our lives, like Colossians, like Paul writes about, living that Christian lifestyle. It's more about incorporating church just, every now and again, incorporating some of the Christian values every now and again. It's about, I believe in God, but, I'll get to that on Sunday. And so I think once you kind of accept, like, no, I'm not going to choose to live for myself. I'm going to choose to live for God. That's like when crazy things happen. I mean, that's when you go from somewhere where you thought you were on a trajectory and then you start a different one. And so I love that so much. I'm actually glad you just brought that up too, because that's like a big thing. I talk with a lot of people about the will of God. Well, what does God want me to do? What am I supposed to do here? What is God wanting me to do when it comes to these finances? If you just take it very slowly, one day at a time, and look at it very simply, just remove your own intuition or remove your own ambition and put it for God, things happen. Crazy things happen, right?
I agree with you, because we have a need to want to control and plan and so this is what my life's going to look like. And I joke now, if you would have told me when I was 18 years old that I would be working for a church as a youth director, I would have laughed in your face, and thought that would never happen. But God he's amazing, and he takes broken people and uses them all the time. So
absolutely,
it's pretty awesome.
Very similar, Don. But I used to joke with my friends about Christian music because I hated Christian music. And I know that hate's a terrible word and it's a bad word, right? But I hated Christian music. I didn't want any part of it. I was like, it all sounds the same. Everything on the radio sounds the same. I don't want to sing Christian music. And so I look at it like God is either very divine in nature or he has an incredible sense of humor, or maybe both.
Yeah.
Maybe both. But he really does do the 360 now that I know my angles and everything. But he really does do the 360s. And I thought my life was on a different trajectory. And he was like, nope, this is the way that it's going to be. And he still does that. And it sounds like he's still doing that for you.
Yeah.
And so before we kind of wrap this thing up, can you tell us a little bit more about like just Impact and Ignite and the fun things that are kind of going on there?
Yeah, so Impact is our middle school ministry. It's grades 6 through 8, and then Ignite is our high school ministry. It's 9 through 12. And it's basically just a safe place to come, hang out. We eat food, of course, because, I love food.
Absolutely.
But come hang out, have food, and learn about God. And it's not about like where you come from or where you've been or if you're bad or good. It's just we're who we are. And I always want kids to just be genuine and authentic. And I try to be the same. Like I'll tell them my story and tell them, I used to do a lot of stupid things. Right. But you're never too far from God. And so it's just like a place where they can come and have fun. We do a lot of fun games. We have a lot of applicable teachings. We teach about social media. We teach about sex. We teach about, I feel like a lot of taboo topics that some churches, and maybe not now, but I know when I was younger, like they would never speak of such things like, don't have sex before you're married, but they never said why or explain like why it matters. It's just not something you talk about. So we talk about a lot of different things, and they're topics that relate to the kids' lives. And then we do a lot of fun outings. We go putt-putting, we go to Sky Zone, we try to serve like with the community basket. We try to do outings and serve the community kind of at the same capacity about every other month. And it's just a place where any kid can come and be welcome. We actually have some kids that don't even attend the jar that come, and that's fine. We welcome anybody. We just want them to feel safe and to have a good experience with church and to know how much God loves them.
Well, thank you so much, Dawn, for being with us. And before we go, we always like to talk about like a life verse, or we like to talk about something that God's been putting on our heart, like this week, maybe even today. And so, before we go, do you have a verse that you want to share with us that might be able to end on our happy note that we like to do?
Yes, Jesus wept. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
All right, see you guys. Have a good one.
So we do here at the jar, we do a word of the year. Instead of, there's nothing wrong with New Year's resolutions, but studies show that people give those up by around February, March sometimes each year.
So like New Year resolutions, basically.
Yes.
That's what. Okay.
Within 3 months, they're done. So
awesome.
We do a word for the year here at the jar, which I like because, you can usually stick to a word and kind of go by that word for the year. And my word this year is stand. And basically it's from 1 Corinthians 16:13, which is be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be strong, be courageous. And part of that is just me growing in my faith, standing in my faith, standing in the promises of God and moving forward in my faith. The past couple years, obviously, we had a pandemic, which was crazy for everybody. But I also lost my mom during 2020 to cancer. And then a year before that, I lost my dad to cancer. So the last 2 years have been really hard for me to stand, I guess. People ask, like, how do you do it? How do you go on? It's like, well, because you have to. You can't just, like, lay down and die. You have to stand and keep going. And so for me, like working through my grief in a healthy way, processing that and even seeing a counselor for that, I've been able to say like, I'm going to stand in God's promises and know that he is for me and he's faithful and he's not going to let me down. So that's my word for this year, and I'm standing.
Amen. Dawn, thank you so much, and we appreciate you so much, everything you do for the jar. You are tough as nails. We thank you so much. We celebrate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.